Good evening, Americans, and welcome to the Ed Show from New York. There's no bigger story in America than the Republican plan to destroy the economy in just 18 days. This is the Ed Show. Let's get to work. Every now and then in this business, you get a feeling about a story. You know, we need to talk more about this. There's not enough conversation about what's going on here. And I want our audience to grab these numbers tonight because a lot of things can happen between now and March 1st that aren't good for the economy. I want to start with this number. $85 billion. That's a lot of money. Think about that between now and the end of the year. $85 billion. In just 17 days, here's another number. The U.S. economy will be hit with $85 billion in across-the-board cuts. How can Americans not be thinking, okay, what does this mean to me? The stakes are high. They're really high. President Obama is going to focus on the economy in his State of the Union address tomorrow night. He needs to. The fragile economic recovery pretty much hangs in the balance when you throw numbers like this around. Congress imposed this budget sequester on the country, and now they have just been unable to deal with it. Here's a taste of what will happen. Here's where the conversation gets a little dicey. It means between 600,000 and maybe a little bit more than 1 million jobs could be lost depending on how businesses react to this. We've had 35 months of private sector job growth. That's a good number with no Republican help. And I think that job growth is going to be in jeopardy, not to mention the impact that these cuts are going to have on discretionary spending. Here's an example. Here's a tornado ripping through Mississippi this weekend. They might need some federal help. Cuts to disaster relief could make a situation like this even worse. Does that bother you? If it hits your backyard, it would. Some people think these cuts are only coming from the defense side of things. Not true. Of the $85 billion, the truth is $42 billion are going to come on the back of defense. That's a lot of other money that's out there that we'll talk about in a moment. But what does this defense money mean? This means that there's going to be an 18% reduction in Air Force flight operations. Naval operations in the Western Pacific would see a cut of about 1/3. And the president over years has moved our carrier groups in a real concentration, naval concentration in the Western Pacific because of China and because of our commitment to Taiwan and the Philippines. A carrier group could be pulled from the Persian Gulf. Conservatives don't like that. What does it all add up to? It all adds up to a lack of resources, but at home it's going to be a loss of jobs. It also hurts small business. Now, you can pick an industry, whichever one you want. There's a lot of them out there that are going to feel the pain. Plastics, electronics, steel, engineering, glass, rubber, paper, transportation, air travel in this country, it's all going to be affected. The list goes on and on. But Republicans, they simply will not budge. They say that Democrats need to offer new cuts to avoid the sequester.
I think Republicans are quite prepared to negotiate on redistributing.
And you're
cuts.
Saying all cuts. No, Republicans are accepting absolutely no revenue.
No, look, absolutely none. The president accepted no spending cuts back in the fiscal cliff deal 45 days ago.
Make no mistake. When Republicans say cuts, they really mean the big three. They want the New Deal. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. They've been after them for years. But here's another number I want to throw out to you. $1.6 trillion. House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi can explain this one.
The fact is we've had plenty of spending cuts, $1.6 trillion in the Budget Control Act.
So this means that Democrats have already offered more cuts than Republicans have offered up new revenue. Now, keep in mind, when we talk about tax increases, this most recent fiscal cliff that we went through, that was an expiration of legislation that was on the books. That's what that was. We went back to the old rates. There's no increase beyond that. But keep in mind, for every $7 in cuts, there's only been $3 in revenue. The solution for more money, well, they're out there without raising taxes. And here's what we can do. We can end $4 to $5 billion a year in big oil subsidies. These record profit oil companies, do they need your tax dollars? I don't think so. We can close corporate tax loopholes. A lot of talk about that, but not a whole lot of action, you know. They kind of get writer's cramp when they start talking about that. The carried interest loophole can be eliminated. Also, Congress can block the use of offshore tax havens. There's legislation going to be on the table that's going to deal with that. How many takers from the Republicans are going to have? And then there's Wall Street traders. You know what they can do? They can pay a fair transaction tax. It would generate billions of dollars. Now, following the State of the Union address, President Obama will spend 3 days pushing his economic message on the road. He has to do it because he knows he has to have the public behind him. The president's doing the right thing by fighting these good fights. The country cannot afford the unnecessary damage from these cuts. I mean, you and I have paid for this economic recovery with a big stimulus package. And all along, the Republicans have said, no, it's not the right thing to do. Now this is their time to spoil all of that. 30-plus months of private sector job growth. We're headed in the right direction, but this sequester is their very point in time in economic history during the Obama years where they could deep six a lot of progress. Expert opinion on this tonight. Let's turn to Iowa Senator Tom Harkin. Senator, good to have you with us tonight.
Hey, good to be back with you, Ed.
I guess we're going to let you go home after 30 years. I don't like it, but I guess that's just the way it is. I appreciate you so much what you've done. You're a tell it like it is kind of guy. What needs to happen, Tom, in order to stop these cuts from taking place?
Well, first of all, Ed, I thought your introduction laid it out very clearly. What I want to hear from the president tomorrow night is a pro-growth, pro-jobs, rebuild the middle class kind of speech. He needs to lay it on the line that we need to invest in our country and rebuilding jobs and rebuilding the middle class. Now, you laid out some of this stuff. When you hear the Republicans talk, Ed, about we got to cut this, we got to cut that, we got to cut this, it's almost like they're saying we're poor. The United States, we're poor, we're broke. The fact is, Ed, we are the richest nation in the history of the world. We are the richest nation today. We have the highest per capita income of any industrialized country. So you have to ask the question, if we're so rich, why are we so broke? The reason is we have a misallocation of money, of capital. Too much has gone into fewer and fewer hands, into large corporations. The Republicans want to keep that going. I mean, you gave one example, offshoring, for example. Right now, look at it this way, Ed. Company A builds a new plant overseas. Guess what? They get a tax deduction for building that plant overseas. They hire workers over there. They get a tax deduction for that. All their operations overseas, tax deductible. But all the profits they make, no taxes. Now, that's not fair.
No, it's
not fair.
It is not fair. The president needs to address that. I agree with you. Now, we talked about solutions to gather new revenue. One of those solutions is a transaction tax on high-speed trading on Wall Street. You believe this will work?
I do, Ed. I've been pushing it for a long time. And quite frankly, I don't know if you saw recently, the European Union just went that way. And all the major nations in Europe now are going to have a transaction tax, which is actually 3 times as large as what we're proposing in this country.
Yeah. Senator, Nancy Pelosi has said over on the House side that raising the Medicare eligibility age is not a viable solution. Today, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney said that it's off the table. Do you think there's enough political will amongst the Democrats collectively to protect the big three?
Well, I sure hope so, Ed. This is a contract that we've made with past generations and with future generations. There's no reason to raise the retirement age whatsoever. There are other ways of making sure that Social Security and Medicare work, like maybe cutting down on some of the huge profits that the drug companies are making off of some of the drugs that we get in Medicare. How about that for an approach?
Sure.
That could sure help.
Senator Tom Harkin, great to have you with us tonight. I appreciate your time tonight on the Ed Show. Keep up the fight, my friend.
Yeah.
Now let's turn to MSNBC political analyst and Georgetown University professor Michael Eric Dyson and Bob Shrum, NYU professor of public policy and contributor to the Daily Beast. Gentlemen, good to have you with us. Bob, you first. What does President Obama need to do between now and March 1st? I mean, he's going on the road right after the State of the Union address. I mean, is power to the people going to be the answer to all of this?
Well, I think
he's got to go out there. He's got to make that case constantly. He's got to say he's fighting for the middle class, position the Republicans so that they are actually held responsible for what happens to this economy. If you look at the polling, people think they're the problem. So tomorrow night he's got to lay the groundwork. He's got to keep pushing these issues. Hopefully he can get something done, force these people to move. Or alternatively, as I wrote last week, he's going to have to campaign in effect for a third term in 2014, try to defy history, and try to see if we can either take back the House or get close to taking back the House.
Michael, is the public aware of the consequences of these cuts and what they would actually bring and how it would gut the middle class?
Well, thanks to shows like yours, Ed, people are aware of it. I mean, the president in his weekend message said, look, we've cut about $2.5 trillion. That's about half of what, reasonable economists and politicians on both sides say we need to cut. It's a balanced mix of revenue raising through taxes and cutting. But as you said, the Republicans won't rest because in their crosshairs are Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They want entitlement reform to end up being rescinding the Great Society and the New Deal for the vulnerable middle class. So when you look at it, the cuts are across the board. You're talking about mental health care professionals. You're talking about HIV care for people. You're speaking about housing. All of these things will be significantly cut. Teachers, law enforcement, all of those people will suffer an enormous loss of not only revenue, but of jobs. And the country, as a result of that, will suffer. I think Bob Trump is right. The president has to barnstorm and shuttle public policy here, get on the road, beat the hustings, and tell the American people exactly what's at stake.
And folks, what Michael's just talking about right there, that's $45 billion between now and the end of the year of cuts out of this year's budget, 2013. Now, the Republican response to the State of the Union is going to be divided. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida is giving the official response. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky is giving the Tea Party response. Bob, which one of these do you think is going to be the most entertaining? I think it's probably going to be Rand Paul, but are they going to be too busy fighting one another, aren't they?
Look, everybody's going to be looking at Rubio because he's been promoted very fast as a possible presidential candidate in 2016. Maybe the magic solution to the Republicans' Hispanic problem. I don't think he is. Rand Paul could say almost anything, so we really ought to watch that. But, this is a massive exercise in hypocrisy the Republicans are going through right now. They claim they're for a strong defense, and they want to pull a carrier group out of the Persian Gulf. Yeah. They claim that on immigration reform, we have to have border security before we move forward, and this sequester would cut the number of border agents. These folks, and you're right, and they don't care what they're going to do as long as they hurt the economy. If they hurt the economy, they think they hurt the president and the Democrats. I think it's too transparent, and the country understands it, understood it in 2012, and they won't get away with it this time either.
And finally, Professor, what do you want to hear the president say tomorrow night? What does he have to drive home?
He's got to drive home the fact that he is the defender and the advocate for the middle class and poor people. Poor people get lost in the sauce here. They don't even get to count because they are so far off the radar of both parties that nobody pays attention to how, if the middle class is suffering, the poor people are suffering even more. The president needs to step up, defend the middle class, defend those who are vulnerable and poor, and articulate it not as special interests, but as a defense of the nation. This is truly the creed of the nation. E pluribus unum, out of many one. We cannot afford for so many millions of our citizens to do poorly while those who are rich do well. The president must continue to hold the rich accountable, the wealthy must be held responsible, and poor people and middle class people must be protected, and he is our advocate.
All right, Michael, Eric Dyson, and Bob Schramm, great to have you with us on the Ed Show tonight. Thank you. Filmmaker Alex Gibney has a new documentary about the Pope's role in the sex abuse scandal rocking the Catholic Church.